A lot of times, I have found that as believers, we are so wrapped up in dealing with the effects that we miss the cause. I've seen it over and over again. We struggle with the ripples, and we do not deal with what is causing the ripples. What is happening behind those ripples? And unless we are cognizant and come to the place where I can identify that, all our lives we will be dealing with the effects, we'll be dealing with the symptoms, and we will not be addressing the problem. Dr. Oral Roberts said, there are two threads that run through the Bible and our life. God is seeking to bless us and to guide us into a place of fulfillment. But on the other hand, the devil is constantly seeking to change us from the ways of God so he can lead us astray and he can destroy our salvation. So there is a constant warfare between the will of God and the plan of the devil. Constant. So let's look at it. Mark chapter 4, verses 35 to 41. I've placed it in the slide, so it becomes very easy. We're going from verse 35. On the same day, when it was eve, or evening was come, Jesus said unto them, let us pass over to the other side. He already finished a tremendous miracle of feeding the people. He took the disciples and said, let's go on the other side. So they got into the boat, and when he had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship, and they were also with him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awake him and said unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perished? And he arose and rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obeyed him? Now here is Jesus addressing the storm. And the storm is basically a violent weather condition that consists of strong winds. But storm can also be a violent disturbance of our peace. Storms are generally any situation or challenging situation we face in our lives. It doesn't really matter how powerful you are, how anointed you are, how many years you have been a Christian, how gifted you are, how well you serve in life. There is one thing that is going to be constant. There is one thing that you are guaranteed, is that the storms are going to come against your life. It's going to come against your life. And every action of the past, of how you respond to those storms, are going to shape your present. And every action of the present and how you respond to those storms is going to shape your future. As Jesus went with the disciples over the Sea of Galilee, I tried getting some picture when we visited Israel of the Sea of Galilee. We had the opportunity to go on one of the ships that was designed just like it was in Jesus' time, and we spent some time on the Sea of Galilee. It was quite an experience. We were in a hotel in the Sea of Galilee. Oh, I forgot to bring, I have some stones, some little stones that I took up from the Sea of Galilee, the shores, and brought it back home. Hid it and brought it home. So some people will say, well, it's looking like normal stone. Well, for me, I know it's the Sea of Galilee stone. And I have it as a souvenir. But it's just fascinating. You will drive down, and it's a body of water that is just about 13 miles long, 7 miles wide, but it's 150 to 200 feet deep. The shoreline itself is about 600 feet below sea level. So you're driving down to the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee was a transit point. Jesus would spend a lot of his time along those areas because it was a transit point, and in so doing, the news of Jesus would have spread. The news of him would have spread. Now, because the Sea of Galilee was below sea level and surrounded by mountains, it was prone to sudden storms. Winds will sweep across the land, come over the mountain, and it will dip down, and the draft that will come down in the lake will cause tremendous thunderstorms, causing the water to be stirred, and at times they recorded waves up to 20 feet rising of water. So at 1 minute, it can be very calm, and then suddenly there can be a storm. And disciples would have experienced this. They were fishermen. They knew how to handle themselves on the water. And so they were crossing. There was nothing different in any other than crossing the Sea of Galilee. And then suddenly there is this storm came upon them, and they were battling with the storm. I want you to picture this in your mind. The rain, the water is beating into the ship, and they're trying to get the water out. They're consumed with every effects that the storm is bringing upon them, and they're fighting their way through the storm, and at that very same time, Jesus is asleep in the ship. With all the movement and everything that is taking place, Jesus is fast asleep in the storm. And the disciples is wrapped up in the situation. They are panicking. They have lost. They are in fear for their lives. Same situation they are facing, but two different responses. How can the storms come upon your life and you can be very calm about it? Very gentle, unconcerned about it, because you have enough faith to believe that you're in control of the storm. They have now completed a tremendous teaching. They've seen a great miracle happen. And in the calm of the evening, Jesus says, let's go to the other side of the lake. Nothing different. Let's go to the other side of the lake. And then suddenly the storm comes. And it reminds us of our lives. We are going about our business, and then suddenly the storms come upon us. Jesus comes out because it seems to me they got a little annoyed. While we are trying to save our lives, and in saving our lives, we are going to save your life, but you're asleep on the boat. Don't you care that we can all perish here? And strange how Jesus just got up from his sleep, and it would have been, why did you wake me up? Get to the front of and began, just spoke to that storm. And it was calm. What's the problem? The disciples were addressing the effects of the storms. They were addressing the effects of the storm. But Jesus addressed the cause. If you get nothing, I want you to get this in this message. The disciples were responding out of fear. We are going to die here in the water. Jesus was responding in faith. The disciples were caught up in addressing the water that was filling up the boat. Jesus was addressing what caused the water to fill the boat. And I believe too many times the enemy has us focus on the consequences and not the cause. See the one? He has us focus on the consequences, focus on the symptoms, focused on the effects, and we are not addressing what's the cause. So that's what we're doing this month. We are addressing the cause. What is causing the problem? You have to be very strategic about it. You see, if every time you are cleaning, you keep cleaning the cobwebs, and you're not looking for the spider, you will not be solving the problem. You will constantly be cleaning cobwebs. You have to take an effort, and so I need to find the spider that is creating this problem. Are we there? A cause is a source or producer of effects. The cause is the source or the producer of the effects, and the effects is the result or the consequences of the cause. So we have cause and effects, two phenomena, in which one of the phenomena is the reason behind the other. And we have to decide that we have to deal with the one that is causing the reason. For example, if you're eating too much food without physical activity, it's going to lead to weight gain. Right or right? If you're just eating and eating and eating, you're going to gain weight. Eating without exercise is the cause. The weight gain is what is going to happen. That's the effects. A few weeks ago, my attention was taken by the amount of wasp, we call it Jack Spanier, that was creating nests all around the buildings, all around my house. It has nothing to do with I have money. It just had to do with they had a place to create a nest. And I thought, where is all this coming from? But every time you break the nest, they simply go and make a nest somewhere else. So it was not solving the problem until I finally decided I have to kill the wasp. If I kill the wasps, there will be no nests. So I came up with a strategy. I got a cigarette lighter and a bomb spray. And I had some fun time. So I was just moving around early in the morning. Check me moving around and looking and just spraying and burning up all those nests and Jack Spanier around. But you have to be very strategic in deciding I'm going to deal with what is the source of the problem. If you don't deal with the source of the problem, you will always be struggling with the results. Are you hearing me? Next slide. A man one day was browsing through a Christian bookstore, and he discovered a shelf of reduced prices. There were some items that had reduced. And among the items was a little figurine. It's like you're seeing there, of a man and a woman, heads touching together, tilt together, one towards another, and it stated "Happy Anniversary." It appeared to be in perfect condition. And he thought for a while, it's not damaged. Why is it here in the shelf being reduced? And stated underneath, it had an inscription, "Damaged." And after he examined it closely, he found that the wife was becoming unglued from the husband. You see, many times the problem is not in the obvious. You have to examine every situation, and eventually the truth will be revealed. It's like a stress. Stress is defined as a feeling of being overwhelmed or unable to cope with a mental, emotional pressure. Stress. The feeling of being overwhelmed and you're unable to cope with a mental or emotional pressure. That is stress. You're just unable to cope with the pressure. That's the cause. What's the effects? Fatigue, disruption of sleep, depressed, acne, headache, chronic pain, frequently sick, digestive issues, loss of appetite, loss of weight, in some instances, gaining weight. All of these are the effects of one thing, stress. You can have all these, or quite a few. You have headaches, you're feeling depressed, you're fatigued, you can't sleep in the night. So many effects, but you have one cause. What's the cause? Stress. What's the stress? I cannot deal with the emotional pressure that is coming against me. What do? We go to the doctor and we says, I can't sleep in the night. I'm feeling depressed. You are listing out all the symptoms that you have. And what is he dealing with? He is dealing with what is causing that. Because he's dealing with the stress. The stress is now producing symptoms. If you continue to address only the symptoms and you don't address the cause of the symptoms, you will move from being depressed one day, next day you are sick, next day you have digestive issues, you run by somebody, they tell you mix up all this drink, you're drinking it, you feel okay, and then another day is something else, and you are still not dealing with what is the core of your problem. You are stressed. You have to decide, how do I develop the emotional power to deal with the pressures that is coming against my life? Find the cause. Now, why am I dealing with this morning? Because we are in a warfare. And sometimes when we're in a warfare, when we face the storms of life, we only address what are the symptoms, and we don't come to a place where we strategically address what is the cause. Remember, the enemy is very subtle, very smart, and he knows how to put in front of you the symptoms, but you are not seeing the cause. That's why a lot of time when I counsel, a lot of time when I'm dealing with demon possession and whatnot, I'm trying to find out what is causing this. Because what is in front of me is the effects. What is being displayed in front of me is the effects. Something is causing it. If I'm only dealing with the effects and don't deal with the cause, then I will continue every week after week in dealing with the effects. Are you hearing me? So I take time to see what's the cause. The result of a backslider, what you see happen over a period of time, is effects. You stop coming to church, you stop praying, you make an excuse, you have problem with everybody, you have problem with the church, you have problem with the pastor, you have all these lists of problems. That's the effect. What is causing all of a sudden that you have all these issues and problems? There is a cause. You are not in the place where you are supposed to be. Watch this. Let's analyze this. how come you are coming in the same church that she is coming to? Both of you are worshiping in the same place under the same pastor every Sunday, and then you have all these issues and problems, and she doesn't have none. Could you explain that to me? Because there is something that is causing this. There is something where she is positioned that is causing it. Because where she is positioned, she is not seeing what you are seeing. She is not experiencing what you are experiencing. Her perception, her mindset is different. You have just moved away from a place where there is a lot of effects, and you are getting wrapped up with the effects, and you're not dealing with what is the cause inside of me. There is some, I'm not praying, I'm not interceding, I'm not walking with. What is the cause? What is causing it to bring me to this place? Because it's not getting me better, it's getting me worse. We are in the same environment, but both of them are responding differently. They are hearing the same message, the same teaching, the same worship, the same pastor, the same church, but we are responding differently. Why? We're in two different places. Same boat, same storm. But one is in a place where he is fast asleep and not allowing the storm to disturb his rest. And the others are panicking and worrying and fretting themselves. They cannot do anything about the storm, but they are wrapped up in the effects of the storm and being stressed out, while the other person is, I have no worries. Storm, you can do what you want. Same environment, same ship. Are you hearing me today? So Jesus came out and he deals with the problem. Wherein is the problem? The problem is not the rain. The problem is not the sea. The problem is not the water that is coming into the boat. The problem is what is causing the water to come into the boat. What is causing the rain to come upon your life? Did it. So Jesus stepped out of the boat. Could we go back to that scripture, Celine? The slide with the scripture? I just want to pinpoint it. Next slide. And what did he do? He rebuked the wind. What were the disciples doing? They were dealing with the water. Throwing out the water. Did Jesus get up and say, boys, let me give you a help. Come, let's bail out this water. You know, that's what we want. Come, let me help you. Let me help you walk through this. Let's bail out. But if you come and say you need to get it right, you need to straighten out your life, this is the problem of your life, we don't like that. We get vexed one time. But then what are we dealing with? We are dealing with the wind, because the wind is causing that. So Jesus stepped out and he dealt with what was the cause. He says, he rebuked the wind. And if he rebuked the wind stopped. Everything else began to function properly. Find the wind. Find the wind that is affecting your life. 99% of the people in churches today who have issues with the church is because they are in a place where they are not supposed to be, and they are dealing with the effects and they are not dealing with the wind. So you will go to another church and another church and another church, and you will have the same problem, because the problem is not the church. The church belongs to Christ. Hello? You didn't come here to worship Pastor Vishnu. You came in here this morning to worship God. We created an environment for you to do that. That's all we did. Created an environment so you can come and you can worship. Let me take 5 minutes. I have to give them up their time. Storm comes when the minute you decide to reposition your life. The minute you decide, let me tell you something. The minute you decide to change what you are doing, it's okay if you can smoke with me, you can drink with me, you can lie with me, we are buddies. The minute you decide to change and better your life, the storms will come. You want to test friends, separate yourself from them. Stop doing the things that they are doing. Begin to change your life. The minute you decide, Jesus says, let's go on the other side. Let's move from where we are now and let's go on the other side. The minute you decide to reposition yourself, the storms will begin to come. You don't have to be living in sin. You just have to decide to be obedient. Secondly, I realized that the storm will come the minute you decide to realign. Now, the multitude did not experience the storm. The multitude experienced a miracle and they left. You know of those kind of people. They left. They experienced the miracle and they left. But the disciples were the one that was close to Jesus. They were obedient to his words. He says, let's go to the other side. The Bible says that he took the disciples and there were many other ships, little ships that followed them. And those that were obedient to him followed. And what happened? The obedience led them into a place where they experienced a storm, but even in their storm, they were able to see the power of God at work. I would rather have Jesus in my storm than to stay on the other side. Just be obedient. Test it for your own self. I'm just going to be obedient. I'm just going to be obedient and walk. Disobedient, stubbornness, rebelliousness caused Eve and Adam to fall away from God. God told Noah, build an ark. It seems to be ridiculous. He didn't understand the whole plan of God, but he was just obedient. Call the people together. Come before me. Spend some time in prayer. Intercede for your community. We are just being obedient. We don't know what God is going to do, what God is preparing, what's happening in the heavenlies. God just wants you to be obedient. The people were laughing while Noah was building the ark. They scoffed and they scorned at him while he was building the ark. But he was just obedient. He didn't have to understand everything. He just had to be obedient. Obedient will cause you to face the worst of storms in your life. Talk to Joseph, and he will tell you his life story. He had to leave his clothes and run. Some of us would embrace that opportunity. When you decide to be obedient and realign yourself to the ways of God, look out, the storms will come. But I want to stay in the will of God, because once I'm obedient to the will of God, I'm in the favor of God. You see, the will of God will never take you where the grace and the favor of God cannot keep you. Storms this morning is a temporary distraction to your destiny. It will come to prove your faith. It proves us. It will come to test what you're really made up of. Storms is what will confirm your shouting and your jumping. Hello? It's easy to shout and jump and sing praises and speak in tongues when everything is going good and God is blessing you and you have no problem in life and your wife loves you and she buying gifts for you and it's easy to rejoice in the presence of God. But when it's not going good and you can be consistent in your praise, when everything else seems to be going wrong, pressure in the job, all over the place, and you can still shout and say, praise God, that's the test. That's where it comes to, where the enemy looks at you and God smiles at you. Job didn't do anything wrong. Did Job did anything wrong? Job did nothing wrong. But the enemy was looking at him. Oh, you want to feel you're going to church? You want to feel you're serving God? You want to feel you're doing this? Let me see how good your God is. And you realize, boy, the more like I committed to God is the more things going wrong. How many of you have been there? Come on. Is the more I pray, like when I wasn't praying, things was going good. But the minute I decided to fast and pray, everything going wrong. And the enemy came before God and says, Job is only blessed because you have a hedge around him. You are protecting him. But give me a chance with him. But God knew Job. Hello? God, how well does God know you? And say, go ahead. He's a man upright. He's a man of integrity. Job lost up to his family. You would think that his wife, poor wife, would stand up with him. I mean, if nobody has stand up with you, at least your wife should stand up with you. If everybody neglects you, you would think that at least, oh gosh, man, your wife will stand up with you. So when your wife come and say, you are foolish, man, why don't you curse God? He had to look at her and say, you're a foolish woman. If I didn't know that when I married, I wouldn't have married you. It takes a test to show your true colors. But you know what happened? The Bible says God blessed Job 100-fold. What I thought was interesting in the end of that story is that Job lost all his children. He would have lost his wife. He would have lost everything. But it would have took him some time. But in the time that he began and God started to bless him, he received even more than what he had. You see, he didn't have overnight. His children just didn't appear back and everything. It would have took some time. But in that time, he was able to accomplish double. The storms will come to prove you. God will not take you to a next place until he proves you, until he tests you. You cannot leave standard 1 and get to standard 2 until you are qualified and ready to handle the work in standard 2. Sometimes we want to jump to standard 5 and we don't know standard 2 and standard 3 work as yet. So you're going to go through. That's how God works. He's going to take you through and allow those storms to come in your life because he wants to prove you. He wants to build character in you. I said I often, it's not how high you jump, but it's what happens when you land in your feet. So storms will come when there is a repositioning. Storms will come when there is a realigning. Storms will come when there is a readjusting. Readjusting. Just jump to the last slide. I think it's the next slide or the last slide. Here is the son coming to the father. He says, He's asking for a raise in his allowance. So the father says, I could raise your allowance, but then I'll have to increase your sisters. Then I will need to ask my boss for a raise. And he would be forced to ask the company for a larger budget, which will lead to higher prices, which will lead to inflation and lead to economics. I didn't have it there. Is it sliding up? Could you get it? Certainly, is that what you want? Asking for a raise, the cause and effects of everything. So make no mistakes this morning, the storms will come. But when it comes, it's going to be just, you have to decide how you're going to respond. You can either respond in fear, in disappointment, in discouragement, or you can stand up and rebuke the wind, find the cause. You are never alone in that storm. Jesus was right there in the ship, in the storm. And he had to rebuke them. He says, why are you responding in fear? I am right here. And we have a tendency, whenever the storm comes, we want to respond in fear. You know, 5-year-old little Johnny was in the kitchen with his mother, and she was about to make supper. She asked him to go into the pantry and get a can of tomato soup. And little Johnny says, I don't want to go there alone. It is dark, and I am scared. And she says, Johnny, it's okay. Jesus will be in there with you. So Johnny hesitantly went. He opened the door. He peeked inside. He saw the dark room. And then he called out, Jesus, if you are in there, could you pass me a can of tomato soup? Storms. Jesus is always in the boat, helping you to deal with the storms that will come into your life. You know, there is a song that says, the anchor holds though the ship is battered. The anchor holds though the sails are torn. When the anchor holds, you don't have to worry about the storm. Let me close this by saying, a young military officer with his newlywed bride set out for a voyage for their honeymoon. And as they sailed, a violent storm hit against the vessel. And the young bride became so frightened, but her husband held her. He embraced her, he calmed her, and he composed her. She became very irritated with him and wondered, why weren't you afraid? The young soldier drew out his sword and placed it to his bride's neck. Looking her in the eyes, and he asked, aren't you not afraid of my sword? And she responded quickly, as long as it is in the hands of the one I love, I am not afraid. I'm not afraid. Sometimes God calms the storm, but sometimes he calms the child. Sometimes God calms the storm, but sometimes he calms the child. You can be the disciples, or you can be like Jesus. You can stay calm in the storm, because you will soon realize that storms don't last forever. They don't last forever. They come and they go. And when they go, if you do not respond correctly, it will batter you down, it will beat you down, it will get you tired, it will get you exhausted, and the storm goes its way and it continues to do what it has to do. And you get so irritated and depressed and discouraged by what that storm did to you. But if you remain calm and rebuke the wind, you can stop the storms in your life. Or you can allow that storm to pass and do not allow the effects of that storm to change your life. How many of you this morning are saying, I am facing my storm, Pastor? It's inevitable. It's just a temporary distraction. Jesus handled it by stepping into action. He stepped into action. He rebuked the wind. The original of that word means to restrain it, to reprove it, to push it back. It was not a gentle language. He dealt with the force behind the storm. That's what he dealt with. The force behind the storm. And then he said to the sea, peace, be still. What was he doing? He was declaring something. He was affirming it. He was asserting his authority. I am God. You are creation. I have control over you. Peace, be still. The storms will come to affect your peace. It will challenge your faith. But I'm here to tell you this morning that you can be calm. You can deal with the cause of that storm without getting wrapped up with the effects.